Hello, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. There are a few situations lonelier than first-time entrepreneurs who have to live through the struggle, the despair, the loneliness of taking a dream and, my word, tangibilitating it so that it becomes a commercial success. Imagining what could be in the face of ridicule, sometimes ridicule, but a good deal of opposition from friends and family and other people who ask always, how can you be so irrational, it won't work? Stop it, stop it, stop it. That can be very, very lonely. I can tell you that from my own experience as an entrepreneur. Michael Dermer, entrepreneur and first-time author of The Lonely Entrepreneur, has captured the essence of the loneliness that particularly first-time entrepreneurs experience. From the day they have an idea, from the day they break from the norm, to create something new and different and exciting. With me today is Michael Dermer. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Who is a native of Manhattan and is on a book tour for his baby called The Lonely Entrepreneur. 318 pages of really easy reading. I would commend it to anyone, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. But those of you particularly who aspire to become an entrepreneur and would like to know from someone who's lived it what it's like to get up in the morning and feel lonely and feel that despair, but on the other hand, to continue to believe that if one more day, one more turn, one more little bit of luck can make all the difference in the world. And that's what Michael talks about in the book. Again, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
What I especially liked about the book was, as I said, the lessons that you lay out in the book are based on your own real life experience. This is not another 10 Steps to Fame and Fortune handbook, as so many of them are. Tell us about your own experience and what inspired you to write the book.
Well, I was a corporate lawyer in New York City.
A reformed lawyer.
Reformed lawyer, and I stumbled upon an idea. And the idea was to reward people for being healthy. And it didn't exist at the time. This is the early 2000s. And as many entrepreneurs know, once you have that idea, it becomes like your oxygen.
Yes.
And so 10 o'clock at night while working at my law firm, business planning and all that stuff, and then left the confines of a really nice, prestigious New York law firm for a basement, and spent the better part of a decade basically convincing, an old health industry, the healthcare industry.
It was expeditionary selling.
Yep. That the future was to reward people for being healthy, no different than they rewarded people in other industries. Built it up, and finally, after many, many years of the blood, sweat, and tears, in the 07-08 era, we really started to break through. We had lots of big health plans and employers as clients. And then right after all this work, right in the middle of 2008, we watched the business that we had spent all that time on basically almost get destroyed overnight. As you can imagine, in 2008, during the financial crisis, all of our clients were big corporate America.
Yes.
And so General Motors and big health plans were collapsing left and right. And so this business that had relied on them as clients basically almost got destroyed. We spent the next 2 years of literally working 20 hours a day to save what it had taken us 10 years to build. And in addition to that, those days would normally end with a screaming match with my brother at the end of the day about what was going to happen with the business. We were fortunate enough to stabilize it, resurrect it, and sold it a couple years later, and it worked out wonderfully. Life-changing experience.
I'm sure.
And I was really honestly just chilling out and reflecting. And somebody had said to me, well, somebody could learn something from your experience. And I was like, it's just our story. And I already lived through it once. I don't want to live through it again. And then I started doing some entrepreneur coaching. And the one theme amongst all the entrepreneurs I was coaching was the struggle. And one of them said to me, being an entrepreneur is really lonely. I was like, wow, there really isn't a resource that understands the struggle and then provides entrepreneurs with all the solutions to all the business and personal issues we all face. So that was it. What started out as, hey, I wonder if there's an idea here, became, the Lonely Entrepreneur book, and now our mission really to turn all this pressure and passion of the entrepreneur into success.
It's not quite the subtitle, but on the cover of the book it says, the difference between success and failure is your perspective. Now, having written the book and all the feedback you've gotten from various sources, Are you still persuaded that perspective of all the variables that may account for success or failure, the perspective is still the singular most important? What about luck?
Yeah. I really am, because when you really think about it, you say, okay, why does one business succeed and the
Yes.
exact same business not succeed? All of us as entrepreneurs are faced with lack of resources, lack of capital, lack of distribution.
Yes.
What we don't lack is the ability to think differently. And so how can you take the set of problems that entrepreneurs experience, and by having a different perspective? I'll give you something very simple. When my business was collapsing, somebody said to me, you know, working 20-hour days, somebody said to me, you have to sleep more. So what's the typical entrepreneur response to that?
I can't
who has
sleep.
time to sleep?
Yeah.
But I wasn't being as productive, and then one day I fell asleep on my couch in my office for a half hour at like 4:30 in the afternoon by accident, and I felt so much better. So what you realize is when we're under the pressure of being an entrepreneur, we develop these kind of flawed perspectives.
Yes.
That if we can just think about things differently, we actually can be a better entrepreneur, not after, you know, a 6-month training course, but we can go back to our desk that very day and be better at it. So I really am convinced the perspective is the key.
It's an interesting point, not only about perspective, but about learning about yourself and what you need, and rhythms, your own rhythms, your own cycles that you go through every day. I know exactly what you mean.
Yep. Well, here's what I would say is that some of the characteristics that make entrepreneurs good entrepreneurs, like ego and confidence.
Right.
One of the best days for me was the day that I realized that being an entrepreneur wasn't a job, it was an identity. And if it was an identity, then embracing the process of getting better at it.
Yes.
And once you wake up every day and say, I'm going to get better at this, then you really start to understand that, wow, I didn't come showing up with all I needed to have, and now I can get better at it every day, so you see those impacts on your business.
There's a flip side to that, though. Because you live your business all the time, day in and day out, when you're in other situations, social situations or so on, with people who are not necessarily entrepreneurs or even business people, my wife would always be on my neck. All you talk about is business. You're always talking about business. And she was right. Sometimes I'm sure I was absolutely boring to some people who might have been a little bit interested at first, but after the first 5 minutes, stop already. You had the same experience?
Absolutely, and we always say that, you know, no one cares as much as you do. We have a chapter in the book called "Your Balloon is Full," and so you have all this energy, and so, for example, if you would say to me, you know, do you prefer Mike or Michael? I would give you a half hour on my pricing model, right? This is what people who aren't entrepreneurs don't understand is this is not optional, it's oxygen. What we have to do as entrepreneurs, and again, this is the perspective of getting better at it, we have to recognize that the rest of the world runs around thinking about kids and family and bills and sleep and life, and we have to understand that how do we police our own behavior better so we can become a better entrepreneur. And in addition to that, when you're not in the business, when you're at a dinner party, at the movies, you need to be there, right? You need to be present, let your brain relax, and that's a skill you have to teach yourself to be better at.
I never learned it.
Yeah.
I never learned it.
It's a hard one.
It is, especially vacations, things of that kind.
Yep.
I would take all of my apparatus with me.
Yep.
When it was bulky and needed extension cords and everything else.
Well, this is one of the things that's really important is that when I say improve as an entrepreneur, it's just not a concept. There's actual things you can do.
Quality of life,
Absolutely.
is just as important as everything else. You mentioned a word, pressure, and it resonated because it's one of the 4 P's in your book. Pressure, passion, pleasure, and pain. Talk about that.
So we are under the influence of these 4 P's. So pressure is, you know, I've left the job. There's financial pressure, family pressure. I think we all understand that. Secondly is passion. You know, we believe in our idea.
Yes.
You know, the analogy I like to use all the time is, you know, in New York City where I live, there's plenty of meatball shops, but you'll say, yeah, but not my meatballs, right? And we have that passion. The pleasure comes from, I mean, think about the things we get excited about, our first deal, even our first logo, our first business card. And then the associated pain that comes with the fact of the employee didn't decide to join you or you didn't get that investment you wanted. That is real significant, visceral stuff. And when that gets all kind of bundled up in your oatmeal, right, it is really difficult to not have blinders on and not have that blind you. So understanding that you're naturally under the influence of these 4 Ps actually helps you get to some of the things we talked about before, which is, okay, I get that, but how do I embrace it to become a better entrepreneur?
There's a very successful entrepreneur I know out in the West Coast, and what comes to mind, I was talking to him one time when we had iGrandparents.com, and we were really stressed out. I mean, it should have worked. The timing was perfect. The market is huge. It should have worked. And I was really stressed out, and I called him. And he said that he had learned about himself, in addition to driving his Aston Martin around, which he thoroughly enjoyed. He said he would go off on a weekend retreat and just chill out, get back to his equilibrium, so he was aligned with what was going on. And he said he was fine for a while, but every once in a while he had to pull back and go into his little retreat, his little universe, and put his head back together again.
Well, so think about the 2 alternatives. It's all about perspective. One is, I'm an entrepreneur, I have to work 24/7, I can't take my mind on. If you're actually good at being an entrepreneur, or better, you recognize that your brain needs rest, your creativity needs rest. So we have a chapter in the book called You Need a Release. For some people, it might be going to the gym. For some people, it might be going on a weekend retreat. I know one of the things, I was kind of a gym rat, and that always helped me. But one of the things that also helped me is I used to go over and babysit my niece and nephew. At the time, they were 4 and 2. Hanging out with them for 2 hours, they couldn't care less about healthcare, but just being outside of yourself and being present. So one of the skills is, when you're outside of work, be where you are and take the time to let your brain rest. Because if you realize that your brain does need a break, you're actually being an entrepreneur, and you can be fresher and more productive when you go back to work.
Okay, so there are the 4 Ps. In your experience, and whatever research may have been done, do certain people deal with the 4 Ps better or worse? Is it a difference depending upon gender or age or station in life? What?
Not really. I think what it really comes down to is when people have the aha moment of embracing the learning. It's more getting over the ego and the doubt and realizing it's actually a strength to embrace the humility and the learning process, right, as opposed to a negative.
Right.
That's really, whether you're a man or woman, young or old, the day you go, I'm not good at this, I need help, or I'm going to embrace getting better at this, you start to approach situations differently. And that, at least for me, and I think for a lot of other people, that's where people go, how can I get better at doing this so I can help my company succeed?
You must have run into entrepreneurs, as I have, who, it's not that they're greedy, but they don't want to give up control. This is my baby, I built it, I brought it to where it is. Well, why don't you hire some? No, I don't want to give up control. Or I don't want to give up equity. Well, why don't you bring in some outside money? No, I don't want to. I don't need it, I don't want it, I want to control my growth. And those businesses don't usually get off the ground.
So that's an example of a flawed perspective that develops from the 4 Ps. So you have that flawed perspective. So for example, if we go next door and we have a piece of pizza, and we love the pizza, and the gentleman that owns the shop says, I make every slice myself, and we go, great, and we say, we want to open 10 of them. And he says, I still want to make every slice myself. Okay. The lack of understanding that that's not going to work. If you said that inside of AT&T or IBM, they'd walk you out of the building. So it's the ability to learn to say, of course I want to hold on to things, that's natural. Of course I don't want to give away with things, that's natural. But if you understand what it means to drive more success in your business, you'll know you'll have to delegate and bring other people and spread those.
On the other hand, that perspective may work for that individual, and he or she may be very successful. I know a restaurant not far from here. He was a chef. He's really quite good. He's got a very successful business. But every single night, he's in there darting all over the place, in and out of the kitchen, with an apron and without an apron. He is a control freak. The downside of that is it creates a culture in his organization where his wait staff and some of the other people dread it when he shows up on the property.
So imagine,
because of his stress.
So imagine if he changed it. So imagine if he changed it to say,
I'm not sure he can.
I'm really, really good at making food. I'm not so good at managing or running a business. So I'm going to embrace making food. I want to be involved in managing the business. But I've already got a staff. Can I supplement it in a different way? Running around with your chicken with your head cut off very rarely translates into a great business.
Yeah.
So how can you say, I recognize it's natural for me to want to do that, but I'm really bad at the front office stuff. So how do I supplement it and change it so I can stick to what I'm doing and make the business more successful?
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Not that easy to do.
No, it isn't.
But
no,
it is
isn't.
if you embrace the learning process.
Especially if you've built something to the point where it's profitable, you don't have to worry about paying the bills, you've got a following now, you've got a brand, etc. And you're deathly afraid that if you make a mistake, you're going to ruin it, or if you rely on other people, they're going to ruin it.
But I can guarantee you, if he cut the turnover of his staff, he could do even better.
Oh, as a matter of fact, he doesn't have turnover on staff.
Oh, wow.
Truly.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. You know, for years, I've heard both sides of the argument about whether people are born to be entrepreneurs or whether or not you can teach someone to be an entrepreneur. And after teaching courses on entrepreneurship myself and working, of course, for the past 15 plus years with early stage companies, I'm not sure where I come down on that because some days I tend to favor the you have to be born, and other times I know examples of people who were not entrepreneurial before, but by dint of circumstance or whatever, they've become very, very successful entrepreneurs, but they had to learn to do it. Are you on either side, or are you down the middle?
I'm a combination of kind of nature and nurture. I believe you have to have certain foundational characteristics, right? You have to have a certain amount of self-esteem. You have to be able to ideate, to be different. You've got to be able to take a certain amount of risk. But there's a lot of people with those characteristics that don't succeed. I think the other part of it is you got to get better as an entrepreneur. Right? There's plenty of people that are born with the capability, for example, to be a great golfer, right? But if they don't hone that craft, right, they'll never reach their potential. So I think we've done a little bit of a disservice to entrepreneurs by saying, if you've got those basic characteristics and enough passion and grit, you'll be good.
Right.
I really think we need to say that's a foundation, but if we don't improve some of the skills we've been talking about, you're not as likely to reach your potential as people who do embrace those skills.
In the book, you talk about emotional intelligence, a term that's been used and abused, misused in academic settings as well as in business. Define emotional intelligence as you intend the meeting to be in the context of the book, and why is it so important?
So if you really think about all the circumstances we encounter in life where there's us and a human being across the table where we have to make a decision, build a plan, take a direction, the ability to kind of digest your own feelings about it, how the person across the table feels about it, and how to actually facilitate the best result. So it's almost like a blender, right? And you put different ingredients in, but you don't press the same button every time. That to me is what emotional intelligence is. The reasons why it's so critical in an entrepreneurial venture is you don't have guardrails, right? In corporate America, you have process. All this stuff exists. You've got things that fit nicely into boxes. In an entrepreneurial venture, right, there aren't any of these processes or these structures. So the ability to be able to sit across the table from an employee, a customer, a vendor, an investor, and to digest what's actually going on in the room, and to develop the sense of what is the right communication, what is the right result, when you don't have those guardrails, is incredibly important to advancing your business and some of those relationships.
When did you learn that?
Oh, I don't think there's a day. I think that...
So there was no single event?
There was not a single event. For me, once you realize you should have a skill, right? That's when you start to put emotional intelligence kind of on the list of how am I going to get better at it, and then you start to apply it and you build on it. But it wasn't until I realized it was something that was so important that I really started to embrace getting
Were you mentored when you started your own company?
You know what? I think I was too headstrong to be mentored. I had some people that were trying to mentor me a little bit, but I was an M&A guy, athlete, a boy, none of which was, right now I consider myself very, very humble and a learner. I don't know if I considered myself those things back then. So for me, it took some time. What really appealed to me was when somebody said to me, if you really think you're good at this, you should learn how much you need to change and grow. And that really probably appealed to my ego, but really appealed to him and said, wow, that's an amazing discovery to say, I can get better at this. And it's one of the reasons why The Lonely Entrepreneur is so much fun for me, is because we get to be with entrepreneurs every day and help them. But it really is about understanding and embracing that growth.
Other than 2008, when the bottom fell out of the economy, and everything you had built looked as if it was going down. Other than that, was there another time, the loneliest time of your journey?
You know what? We believe so much in our idea, and my company and my employees, all the people that sweat over the years, that even when things went up and down, there really wasn't. I mean, even when I was sitting alone by myself and health plans were saying no left and right, this just became like our oxygen. Almost all those kind of lonely moments were around 2008. But one of the reasons why this whole idea of the struggle, right, runs across that whole period for me, no different than for every other entrepreneur. So I never looked at it, I looked at it as a blessing to be able to bring this idea to life, but along the way, there's all those times where you're lonely. But there wasn't really any moment, it was just the nature of the whole beast. And you had to be able to say, okay, this is the way it is every day, what do I actually do about it?
But Michael, at least in my experience, every idea has its time. In one of the ventures I was involved in, we were 5 years ahead of our time, and there was nothing you could do. Another chap I know who left corporate and invested a lot of his own money in something he really believed in because he saw the need, and he spent 4 years trying to determine whether or not there was a market, a real market. But he would go home every night, and his wife would say, "Are we going to make it? Are you going to burn through everything?" And he had amassed quite a bit of money in his corporate position. And he told me, he said, there were days when I just wasn't sure, but I really had no option. I had to keep pushing, partly because he really believed in it, but also because he really felt he had no option. He was beyond the point of no return. Speak to that, and the point we were discussing earlier today at the meeting of the Entrepreneurs Network, and that is walking the line between being a rational human being and an irrational entrepreneur.
It all goes back to this idea of being under the influence of these 4 Ps. We have this infinite belief in our idea. And certainly we should get better at discerning our own idea. We're just not going to be that good at it. We believe in it. So how do you actually get better at that? The way you get better at it is build a group of people. Build some trusted allies and colleagues and friends who will be candid with you. They'll be candid with you when you're thinking about leaving your corporate job, investing your own money, going to the next stage. The conversation between the husband and wife doesn't work, right? There's too much angst and emotion and energy in that. But imagine if you had a group of 3 people that really had your best interest at heart, that were willing to be candid with you at every stage of the process. So that's one of those techniques we can take our own flawed perspective, which is, I'm going to run into that wall regardless of what it does, versus, hey, let me run a process where I sit down with my people once a month and they tell me where I am, how am I doing, should I be continuing, might I go about doing it differently. It's really hard to do that ourselves.
So you're in favor of having an advisory board early on, if you could put one together.
Yeah, that's great for things like interviewing employees. Right, where we're not objective about that. It all comes down to the pressure we're under.
Talk about a subject that is of special interest to me, and that is older entrepreneurs. As you, I'm sure, know, according to the Kauffman Foundation, a very significant portion of early stage companies, startups, and so on are between the ages of 50 and 65. One, what is impelling or compelling them to move in the direction of starting, buying, owning their own businesses, other than need in some cases? And do they have an advantage because they are older, more experienced, and presumably wiser than their younger folk?
I don't think there's any question that when you look at what's going on in corporate America and where the future of wages and earning comes from, anybody that's not thinking about entrepreneurism in one way, shape, or form is not reading the Wall Street Journal every day. So when people are working longer and retiring later and living longer, I think that generation of folks is coming to the table saying us too. I think in some ways that group has a huge advantage because what comes with age and maybe the graying of our hair or the breaking down of our bodies, what goes side by side with that is,
easy does it.
is wisdom. And not just the wisdom. Think about emotional intelligence. The wisdom that comes with having seen things, not even just in our generation, but in other times. I know during the time where my company was really on the brink, speaking to my father and my mother about the things that they had seen. That didn't necessarily have to do with the clicks on a cell phone. There was so much wisdom there. It's hard to get wisdom when you're 25. And so I think they bring a level of experience. And if they can just supplement that with, okay, I need to learn a little bit of the newer age technology that I didn't grow up in, which is very doable. I think those folks have an incredible, when you've seen something over 20 or 30 or 40 years,
yes,
the wisdom that comes from that can really be put to life in amazing ways.
I agree. What I have observed, however, is too many older folk delude themselves into thinking that the skills, the competencies, the subject expertise they've developed working for somebody else, somebody else's payroll, is automatically transferable to owning and operating their own business. Go back to your point. It's not just knowing, it is the perspective, it's knowing yourself and how much tolerance you have for living a different life.
So, whether you're 55 or 25, the ability to understand that when you leave corporate America in some way to go out into this wild, wild west of entrepreneurism, understanding, right, what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you know and what you need to know. We hope, right, that when we're a little bit older, we're a little more self-aware, we have a little bit more self-esteem, and we have the ability to digest that and come to the table with a little greater understanding
Michael,
when we're younger.
Totally agree with you, but I still miss having a chauffeur-driven limousine at the curb rather, to take me over to Manhattan. One of the perks I had when I was in corporate America. I'm not sure they do that anymore, but it sure was. It felt good.
Well, listen, I think that there is the wild swings of being an entrepreneur, and that is the we're talking about some of the struggles. It's probably also the most rewarding thing,
no question,
you'd ever do. So I think that's why the ability to get better at it. This is not going anywhere, right? It's continuing to grow and become more prevalent. And even if we are not an entrepreneur, we have to be more entrepreneurial. Even if we sit within corporate America. So the ability to embrace the ups and downs and actually get good at doing that. There'll be some people that will just get the limo every day. Most of us are going to come across an entrepreneurial venture at some point in our lifetime.
How long did it take you to write The Lonely Entrepreneur?
Believe it or not, it only took about 2 or 3 months.
Really?
It took a little towards the end to kind of finish off the last 10%.
To get off stage.
But I can tell you that there's so much that came out of our experience when I was able to take a step back and I wasn't living it anymore. It literally just came out. At the time when you're wound in it, and some of the crazy things we did along the way. But it actually, 90% of it came out in 2 or 3 months, and then it just took us a little bit longer to polish it out.
If you could rewrite it, go back and rewrite this book, would the messages be essentially the same? How would it be different, having had the opportunity to reflect on what you've written and how people have reacted to it?
Most of it would be largely the same. The only thing I would do, and this came from feedback from a lot of people that have bought and read the book, is they're like, what about fashion? What about healthcare? We tried to create something that was a foundation for broader things. So they would have liked to see more kind of industry-specific content. Like, this stuff makes sense. But now I'm going into a fashion business, so some of the next forays for us are going to be The Lonely Entrepreneur on fashion and on restaurants and on healthcare.
Chicken soup for the entrepreneur, that model, Okay. How do people get a copy?
So just go to lonelyentrepreneur.com.
Not The Lonely.
Just lonelyentrepreneur.com.
Okay.
We've got our, obviously the book on there, and we've got a bunch of coaching programs, a free blog, where we'd send out a perspective of the day every day.
All right.
And then I think I've shared with you before, next year we're launching a whole online learning subscription where, all the things you need as an entrepreneur to get through the struggle and get better at it will all be housed at lonelyentrepreneur.com.
It's on Amazon as well?
It's on Amazon as well.
Both hardcover and softcover?
Hardcover, softcover, as well as electronic.
As ebook?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure visiting with you. I enjoyed the time we spent earlier today at the Entrepreneurs Network, as did the attendees at the meeting. You've got something. It's the title. That's a grabber. But just having the opportunity to visit with you and talk about your journey has been very, very informative, and I think will be helpful to a lot of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate
you being here. My guest today has been Michael Dermer, who is an entrepreneur himself and the author of The Lonely Entrepreneur. Until next time, this is the Entrepreneurs Network. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves